She went into labor, believing she was about to give her billionaire husband the greatest gift of his life, but he ignored every call. Her final message shattered his pride. I own a $10 billion empire, and this child no longer carries your name. Within seconds, he was racing to the hospital in disbelief. Hi, my beautiful family. Let's begin this most beautiful story together. A story filled with deep emotion and truth. But before we start, I want to speak from my heart. Why are so many of you leaving early? Have my stories lost their spark, or have you stopped trusting your brother Peter? Please tell me honestly in the comments. Your words mean everything to me. And my beautiful family, don't forget to show your support with a like. Lately, those likes have become so few. Let's start with love. Some men don't realize they're holding heaven until it slips through their fingers, and by then, hell has already learned their name. The desert wind carried sand and destiny. The afternoon Brian Wilson first saw Harriet Kemsley. She walked into his investor meeting like a storm wrapped in human skin, dust coating her hiking boots, cameras hanging from her shoulders, and eyes that could cut through steel. His team was presenting plans for a new resort that would demolish a Berber village. And she didn't knock before entering. "Stop talking," she said, her voice filling the tent they'd set up as a temporary office. "Every word out of your mouths is an insult to the people who've lived here for centuries." Brian's lead architect stammered. His financial advisor went red. His security detail moved forward, but Brian raised his hand. He couldn't look away from her. She was tall, dark-skinned, beautiful in a way that made expensive things look cheap. But it was the fire in her eyes that stopped his heart. "Who are you?" he asked. "Someone who actually belongs here. I'm photographing the Berber tribes for National Geographic. I've spent months with these families, learning their stories, earning their trust. And you want to bulldoze their heritage so rich people can drink cocktails and pretend they've experienced culture. We're offering them compensation." "Compensation?" She laughed, and the sound was sharp as breaking glass. "You can't compensate someone for erasing their history. Your resorts are cultural graveyards dressed in luxury linens. You take sacred places and turn them into playgrounds for people who will never understand what they destroyed." His team erupted in protests. His lawyers threatened her with trespassing charges. But Brian held up his hand again, silencing them all. He stood, walked around the table, and faced her directly. "Then help me do it right." She studied him like he was a puzzle she had no interest in solving. "You don't want to do it right. You want to do it profitably. There's a difference. Show me the difference." "Why would I?" "Because I'm asking." Something shifted in her expression. Curiosity, maybe, or challenge. "One day? I'll give you 1 day with the families here. If you can sit with them, listen to their stories, and still want to build your resort on their graves, then you're exactly who I think you are. But if you can see them as people instead of obstacles, maybe you're worth the breath I'm wasting on you." That day changed everything. Brian sat in a village elder's home, drinking mint tea, listening to stories passed down through generations. Harriet translated, but she didn't need to. The love these people had for their land needed no language. By sunset, he was on the phone with his team, cancelling the project, eating millions in sunk costs. Harriet found him sitting alone as stars appeared overhead. "You actually did it. I couldn't build there after today. I'd see their faces every time I visited. Most men in your position wouldn't care about faces." "Maybe I'm not most men." She sat beside him in the sand, and for the first time she smiled. It was small, cautious, but real. "Maybe you're not." 3 months of chasing her across continents. She was in Bali when he flew there to apologize for things he hadn't done yet. She was in Patagonia when he showed up with a proposal. Not marriage, but a partnership to reimagine luxury travel. She refused him 7 times, each rejection cutting deeper because he was falling in love with someone who didn't need him, didn't want his money, didn't care about his name. The 8th time, in a small cafe in Paris, where she was preparing for a photography exhibition, he didn't propose anything. He just told her the truth. I've spent my life building things that don't matter. Resorts that look beautiful but feel empty. Experiences that people forget before they leave. I want to build something real, something that honors places instead of consuming them. But I don't know how. You do. Teach me. Why should I? Because I see you, Harriet. I see your vision, your fire, your refusal to compromise. And I think together we could change how people see the world. Or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just another rich man trying to buy something he doesn't deserve. Tell me which one I am. She looked at him for a long moment, searching his face for lies. Whatever she found must have satisfied her, because she said, "You're the rich man. But maybe you could become something else. Maybe." Their wedding in Santorini was small, intimate, perfect. Just them and the Aegean Sea, and promises whispered in the wind. His mother, Eleanor, refused to attend. She sent a telegram instead. "You're making the biggest mistake of your life. That woman will destroy everything we built." But standing there watching Harriet walk toward him in a simple white dress, flowers in her hair, barefoot on ancient stones, Brian couldn't imagine anything being destroyed except his old life, the empty, meaningless one before her. Their early marriage was volcanic. They designed travel experiences that respected local cultures, hired indigenous guides, created partnerships instead of transactions. Harriet left her rising photography career, exhibitions in Paris and New York, awards that put her name in magazines, to build something with him. She believed in their partnership, in what they could create together. The night their daughter was conceived, they were in their villa overlooking the Amalfi Coast. They'd spent the day with local fishermen, learning techniques passed down through generations. And that night, on their terrace under stars that seemed close enough to touch, they made love like they were creating the universe. Afterward, Harriet lay in his arms and whispered, "I want a child with you. I want to give her the world the right way, showing her that beauty isn't about owning things, but honoring them." Her. Brian smiled against her hair. Her. I know it's a girl. I can feel it. But Eleanor's poison was already seeping in, slow and surgical. She scheduled emergency board meetings during Harriet's presentations to investors. She whispered to Brian during late-night calls that his wife was trying to change everything your father built. She planted seeds of doubt disguised as concern. "Those photographers she works with, are you certain it's just professional? She spends so much time with those tribal communities. People talk, Brian. They say she prefers them to us." Pregnancy makes women emotional, irrational. Don't let her manipulate you with tears and demands. And Brian, desperate to prove himself worthy of his late father's legacy, exhausted from trying to expand the empire while honoring Harriet's vision, began staying later at the office, began missing the trips they planned together, began letting his mother's voice drown out his wife's. Harriet felt him slipping away like water through fingers. She tried to talk to him, but he was always on his phone, always distracted, always choosing one more meeting over one more moment with her. She was 8 months pregnant, her body heavy with their daughter, and he barely looked at her anymore. Their anniversary arrived, the day they married in Santorini, the day they promised forever. Harriet planned a quiet dinner at home, just the two of them, one last intimate evening before their baby arrived. She wore the dress he loved, cooked his favorite meal, lit candles throughout their penthouse. Brian came home at 7, already on his phone. Eleanor's voice drifted from the speaker as he walked past Harriet without really seeing her. "Yes, Mother, I understand. The Singapore investors won't wait. I'll catch the red-eye tonight." Harriet felt something break inside her chest. "Tonight? Brian, it's our anniversary." He looked up, seeing her for the first time. The dress, the candles, the dinner growing cold. Guilt flashed across his face, but his mother's voice cut through it. "Brian, this deal is worth 300 million. Surely your wife understands business comes first." "I'll make it up to you when I get back," he said, already moving toward their bedroom to pack. "This deal is crucial." Harriet followed him, one hand on her swollen belly where their daughter kicked and tumbled. "And what about us? What are we worth? Don't be dramatic. It's 3 days. You'll barely notice I'm gone. I'll notice. Your daughter will notice. She's not even born yet, Harriet. The words hung between them like smoke. Not even born yet. Like she didn't matter because she hadn't arrived. Like Harriet didn't matter because she was just the vessel carrying his legacy. Harriet stood in the doorway, watching him pack, and something shifted in her. Something fundamental and irreversible. She'd sacrificed her career, her exhibitions, her dreams to stand beside him. And he couldn't sacrifice 3 days for their anniversary, for their unborn child, for her. Go, she said quietly. Go to Singapore. Make your deal. Build your empire. He heard the strange calm in her voice, but misread it as understanding. He kissed her forehead absently, already mentally on the plane. I'll call you from the airport. She watched him leave, watched the door close, watched the candles burn down to nothing. She pressed both hands to her belly and whispered to the daughter moving inside her. Your father doesn't see me anymore, baby girl. He doesn't see us, but he will. I promise you he will, because while he's busy building empires he thinks matter, I'm going to build something he never knew existed. And when he finally opens his eyes, we'll be gone. We'll be untouchable. We'll be free. Isabella, because she already knew her daughter's name, kicked hard against her palms, as if sealing the promise. Harriet stood alone in their penthouse, surrounded by the remains of a celebration that never happened, and began planning her revolution. She had no idea her water would break in 3 days. She had no idea she would scream his name 17 times into a phone that never answered. She had no idea that missing their anniversary was the smallest betrayal compared to what was coming. But she knew this. She would never be invisible again. Not to him. Not to anyone. Not ever. Chapter 2. The day everything shattered. Pain woke her at dawn. Harriet lay in their massive bed. Brian's side still made, still empty, and felt the first contraction tear through her abdomen like a fist clenching around her spine. She breathed through it the way the birthing classes taught her. The ones Brian missed because of meetings. All of them. The contraction passed. She checked the time. She had time. First babies took hours, everyone said. She would call Brian, he would come home, everything would be fine. The second contraction hit before she made it to the bathroom. Stronger, closer. She gripped the doorframe and tried to breathe. But the pain was massive, consuming, real, in a way nothing in her life had prepared her for. She dialed Brian's number. It rang 4 times, voicemail. Brian, I'm in labor. The contractions are close. I need you to come home, please. She hung up, waited. He would call back. He always called back. Third contraction. She was on her knees now, pressed against the cool tile of their bathroom floor. Something was wrong. It was too fast, too intense. She dialed again. Voicemail. Brian, something's wrong. The contractions are coming every few minutes. I'm scared. Please call me back. She called his assistant. Voicemail. His driver. Voicemail. His office. A recording about being closed for the weekend. 4th contraction. She was crying now, alone, terrified. Her water broke, a warm rush that soaked through her nightgown, and she knew she couldn't wait anymore. She called emergency services, then tried Brian again. This is my 5th call. I'm going to the hospital. Our daughter's coming. Please, Brian, please answer. The ambulance came. Paramedics found her on the bathroom floor, clutching her phone, still trying to reach her husband. They loaded her onto a stretcher, asked about family, about who they should call. She gave them Brian's number. They tried. Voicemail. The hospital was bright and cold and full of strangers. Nurses asked questions she could barely answer through the pain. Where's your husband? Is anyone coming? Do you have family nearby? No, no, no. Just her and the baby and the phone she clutched like a lifeline while she dialed and dialed and dialed. 6th call. 7th. 8th. A nurse gently took the phone from her hand. Honey, you need to focus on breathing. Whoever he is, he's not answering. You need to be here now for your baby. But she wasn't ready. She couldn't do this alone. This was supposed to be their moment. Brian holding her hand, coaching her through contractions, witnessing their daughter's arrival. This was supposed to be beautiful. Ninth call from the delivery room. The pain was beyond description now, beyond anything she imagined pain could be. She screamed into the phone's voicemail, "I'm pushing. Do you hear me? I'm pushing our daughter into the world, and you're not here. Please, Brian, please." 10th call, 11th, 12th. A doctor she'd never met was between her legs, telling her to push. A nurse she'd never seen held one hand. Another nurse held the other. They were kind, professional, but they were strangers. She was bringing life into the world, surrounded by people who didn't know her name. "One more push," the doctor said. "Your baby's almost here." 13th call, 14th, 15th. She pushed and screamed and pushed and called his name, not into the phone anymore, but into the sterile air of the delivery room. "Brian, Brian, where are you? I need you." But he wasn't there. He wasn't anywhere. 16th call as the baby crowned. 17th call as her daughter slipped into the world, tiny and perfect and screaming with the outrage of being born. "It's a girl," someone said. "You have a beautiful daughter." They placed the baby on Harriet's chest, warm, wet, wailing. Harriet looked down at the tiny face, the eyes squeezed shut, the fists waving at the world, and something inside her crystallized into diamond-hard clarity. She had done this alone. She had brought life into the world without him. She had screamed his name 17 times, and he had chosen silence. A nurse was asking about the birth certificate. "Baby's name?" "Father's name." Harriet's voice was steady despite everything. "Isabella Grace Kemsley. Father's name is not going on the certificate. Are you sure?" "Most couples, I'm sure. This is my daughter. Mine." They cleaned Isabella, checked her, wrapped her in a hospital blanket covered in tiny footprints. They placed her back in Harriet's arms, and Harriet studied every detail of her daughter's face. She looked like Brian, his eyes, his nose, his stubborn chin. But she would never know she looked like a man who hadn't shown up for her birth. Harriet's phone sat on the table beside the bed, silent. 17 missed calls on Brian's end now, if he ever bothered to check. 17 chances he didn't take. She picked up the phone one last time, but not to call him. She texted her assistant, a woman who'd worked with her on all the secret business deals, all the properties Brian never knew about, all the empire she'd built in shadows and stolen hours. "It's done. I had the baby. Isabella, start the next phase. Release the press statement about Kemsley expeditions to all major outlets. File the divorce papers. And make sure he sees both at exactly the same time." The assistant responded immediately. "Are you sure you want to do this now? You just gave birth." Harriet looked at her daughter, then at the phone, then at the empty space where Brian should have been. "I've never been more sure of anything. He made his choice. Now I'm making mine." She composed a message to Brian. Her fingers shook, but the words came clear and cold. "I built something while you weren't looking. $10 billion in luxury safari lodges, boutique island resorts, and exclusive expedition companies across 4 continents. I used my maiden name. I used the vision you forgot I had. Every connection I made through your world. Every contact you introduced me to at every gala and resort opening. Every supplier who watched you ignore me at business dinners. I turned all of it into something you'll never touch. This child is mine. Her last name is Kemsley. You can read about us both in tomorrow's travel industry journal. Don't call again." She hit send, then she turned off her phone, pulled Isabella close and let herself cry, not from pain or fear or even sadness, but from the strange, fierce joy of knowing she would never need him again. She had built her own heaven, and he would spend the rest of his life realizing he'd been holding it all along. Hours passed. The hospital was quiet in that deep night way, where everything feels suspended. Harriet dozed between feeding Isabella, learning the weight of her daughter, the sound of her breathing, the miracle of her existence. Somewhere over the Pacific Ocean, a plane was landing. Somewhere in Singapore, a man was checking his phone for the first time in hours. Somewhere a fool was discovering what he'd lost, but in this hospital room, Harriet was discovering what she'd gained: a daughter, an empire, a future that belonged entirely to them: freedom. Chapter 3. The Message That Broke a Billionaire. Brian landed in Singapore to 17 missed calls, 12 voicemails, and a dozen text messages from Harriet. He was climbing into the car his mother had arranged when he finally looked at his phone. His blood went cold. The first voicemail was her voice, calm and controlled. "Brian, I'm in labor. The contractions are close. I need you to come home, please." He skipped ahead. "The 5th. This is my 5th call. I'm going to the hospital. Our daughter's coming. Please, Brian, please answer." The 9th, screaming. Pure primal screaming that made his hands shake. "I'm pushing. Do you hear me? I'm pushing our daughter into the world, and you're not here. Please, Brian, please." He couldn't breathe. He tried to call her back, but her phone was off. He tried the hospital, but they wouldn't give him information without authorization. He tried her assistant, who answered with ice in her voice. "Mr. Wilson, how was Singapore? Where is she? Is she okay? Is the baby—" "Mother and baby are healthy. No thanks to you. I need to see her." "Which hospital?" "That's not my information to give. Miss Kemsley will contact you if and when she chooses." "Miss Kemsley? She's my wife. Not for much longer." "Check your email. You'll find divorce papers waiting. Miss Kemsley's attorney will be in touch." She hung up. Brian sat in the back of the car, his mother's driver waiting for instructions, and felt his world disintegrating. He pulled up his email. Divorce papers. A custody arrangement that gave him supervised visitation only. A financial settlement that gave her nothing because she wanted nothing from him, and a message from Harriet. He opened it with shaking hands. The words hit him like bullets. An empire, $10 billion, properties he never knew existed, a daughter whose last name wasn't his. All of it built while he thought she was home, being the dutiful wife, waiting for him, depending on him. He opened his news alerts. There it was, on every major business outlet. Mystery travel mogul revealed. Harriet Kemsley's $10 billion empire built in secret. Kemsley Expeditions, the woman who redefined ethical luxury. Exclusive. How Harriet Kemsley built an empire. While married to Wilson Global heir, the articles were detailed, comprehensive, devastating. They outlined her properties: safari lodges in Tanzania, boutique resorts in Bali, expedition companies in Patagonia. They praised her vision, her partnerships with indigenous communities, her revolutionary approach to luxury travel. They showed photos of her standing before properties bearing her name, looking powerful and radiant. And in every photo, she held a baby. His daughter Isabella. Brian called his assistant. "Get me on the next plane back. I don't care about the Singapore deal. Get me home." "Sir, your mother specifically said—" "I don't care what my mother said. Get me on a plane or you're fired." He spent the flight reading everything he could find about Harriet's empire. The scope of what she'd built was staggering. She'd used every contact he'd ever introduced her to, every connection from every gala and business dinner, and turned them into partnerships for her own vision. She'd learned languages: Swahili, Balinese, Spanish. She'd spent months negotiating land rights, while he thought she was at spa appointments. She'd built relationships with communities, while he thought she was doing charity work. She'd seen his world as a resource, and she'd mined it perfectly. The plane couldn't fly fast enough. He landed and drove straight to the hospital, where his assistant finally got him the information. But when he reached Harriet's room, it was empty, cleaned out. No trace of her or the baby, except a note on the bed, written in her elegant handwriting. "Room 847, but you're not on the visitor list." "You gave up that right." He found the room. 2 security guards stood outside. He showed his ID, explained he was the father, demanded to see his wife and child. They checked their tablets, shook their heads. Miss Kemsley left explicit instructions. No visitors except those on her approved list. "You're not on the list, sir. That's my wife. That's my daughter. According to hospital records, you're not listed as the father. And Ms. Kemsley has made clear she doesn't want to see you. Brian tried to push past them. They were professional but firm, blocking him without violence. Other patients and visitors started staring. A nurse approached, asked him to lower his voice. I need to see her. I need to apologize. I need to meet my daughter. Sir, if you don't leave voluntarily, we'll call security. Ms. Kemsley has every right to refuse visitors. He stood in that hospital hallway, security guards blocking the door to his family, and realized he had no power here. No money or name or connections could get him through that door. Harriet had taken all the power he never realized she had. His phone buzzed. Another message from Harriet. I know you're in the hallway. I can hear you. Go home, Brian. You weren't there when I needed you. I don't need you now. He texted back desperately. Please, let me see her. Let me explain. The response came fast. Explain what? That your mother arranged an emergency meeting? That you forgot our anniversary? That you left your phone in the car? I don't care about explanations. I care about choices. You chose wrong. 17 times. Now live with it. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't put you in that delivery room. Sorry doesn't hold my hand while I screamed your name. Sorry doesn't change the fact that our daughter entered the world without her father because he had better things to do. Let me fix this. You can't. Some things break so completely they can't be fixed. They can only be walked away from. That's what I'm doing. I'm walking away. And I'm taking our daughter with me. Harriet, please, don't text me again. My lawyer will contact you about supervised visitation arrangements. Maybe, if you're lucky. Right now, I don't think you deserve to know her at all. Brian slid down the wall, sitting on the hospital floor like a vagrant, staring at his phone. Security guards watched him warily. Nurses passed with sympathetic glances. And behind that door, Harriet held their daughter and built a future he wasn't part of. He tried calling. Her phone was off. He tried her assistant again. No answer. He tried everyone in her contact list he could remember. No one would talk to him. Finally, he drove home to their penthouse. Maybe she'd come back. Maybe they could talk. Maybe he could make her understand. But the penthouse was empty. Not just empty, stripped. Her closets were bare. Her photography equipment gone. Her books, her clothes, her presents erased from every room. The only thing she left was their wedding photo from Santorini, sitting on his desk with a crack through the glass, right through his face, and the divorce papers underneath. He picked up the photo, studied the crack, and understood the symbolism. She'd broken them, or rather, he had, and she'd documented it so he'd never forget. His phone rang. His mother. Brian, darling, I saw the news. Can you believe the nerve of that woman? Using your connections to build her own empire? It's theft. Corporate espionage. We'll sue her for everything. He hung up, stared at the phone, and something clicked in his mind. His mother had arranged the Singapore trip. His mother had suggested he leave his phone in the car to show complete focus. His mother, who'd been poisoning him against Harriet for months. His mother, who'd made sure he missed their anniversary, missed the birth, missed everything that mattered. His mother had known Harriet was building something, and she'd made sure Brian was too blind to see it. He drove to his mother's estate, the one she'd kept after his father died. Let himself in with his key. Found her in her study, drinking wine, looking satisfied. There you are. I expected you hours ago. We need to strategize about how to handle this situation with your wife. What did you do? His voice was quiet, dangerous. I protected our family legacy from a gold digger who was using you for... What did you do, Mother? Eleanor set down her wineglass. I did what you were too lovesick to do. I made sure she didn't destroy everything your father built. She wasn't destroying anything. She was building something incredible, using your contacts, your connections, your name. So what? We're married. We're supposed to be partners. Partners. Eleanor laughed. She was using you, Brian, taking everything you gave her and turning it against you. I simply made sure you weren't too distracted to see it. You made sure I missed our anniversary. You made sure I wasn't there when she gave birth. I made sure you focused on what matters, business, legacy, the empire your father died building. Brian walked to her desk, pulled open drawers until he found what he was looking for. Files. Years of files. Letters Eleanor had written to business associates, warning them about Harriet. Reports from private investigators following his wife. Bank statements showing payments to people who'd made Harriet's business deals fall through. "You sabotaged her," he said, reading through the files. "You actively sabotaged your own daughter-in-law. I protected you. You destroyed my marriage." She destroyed it by being unworthy of you. Brian looked at his mother. This woman who'd raised him, taught him business, stood beside him after his father died, and saw a stranger. A cruel, bitter stranger who'd poisoned everything beautiful in his life. "You're fired," he said. "From the company. From my life. All of it. Don't be ridiculous. I'm on the board. I can't be fired. Watch me. I'm calling an emergency board meeting tomorrow. I'm showing them these files, the embezzlement, the sabotage, all of it." "You're done." Eleanor stood, fury replacing satisfaction. "If you do this, you'll lose everything. The board will turn on you. They'll see you as weak, choosing a woman over family legacy. Then I'll lose everything. At least I'll lose it trying to fix what you broke." He left her screaming at him, drove back to the empty penthouse, and sat in the dark. His phone was silent. His home was empty. His daughter existed somewhere in the world, and he'd never held her. His wife had built an empire, and he'd never seen it. He'd lost heaven while counting dollars, and hell was just beginning to teach him his name. Chapter 4. The Mother Who Destroyed Everything. The emergency board meeting lasted 6 hours. Brian presented every piece of evidence he'd found in Eleanor's office. 15 years of embezzlement, hidden in shell companies and creative accounting. Payments to investigators who'd followed Harriet. Bank transfers to business associates who'd sabotaged his wife's deals. Letters full of lies about Harriet being mentally unstable, gold-digging, dangerous to the Wilson legacy. The board members sat in stunned silence as he showed them email chains where Eleanor had actively worked to destroy Harriet's business ventures. She'd blocked permit applications using Wilson Global's political connections. She'd spread rumors to investors that Harriet was using stolen funds. She'd even paid off hotel staff to report fake stories about Harriet having affairs. "She didn't just hate my wife," Brian told the assembled board. "She tried to destroy her. And she used company resources and embezzled funds to do it." Eleanor sat at the end of the table, her face a mask of cold fury. When he finished, she spoke with steel in her voice. "Everything I did was to protect this company. That woman was using Brian's connections to build a competing empire. She was a threat. She was my wife," Brian said. "And she wasn't building a competing empire. She was building ethical partnerships in regions we'd never touched. She was making the industry better. She was making herself rich using our resources." "No, she was making herself powerful using her own vision. The connections I introduced her to, she earned their respect. The deals she made, she negotiated them herself. The properties she built, she designed them with her own hands. You tried to stop her, and she succeeded anyway. That's not theft. That's brilliance." One of the board members, an older woman who'd worked with Brian's father, spoke up. "Eleanor, did you actually embezzle company funds?" "I moved money to protect our interests." "That's not an answer. I did what was necessary. The vote was unanimous. Eleanor Wilson was removed from the board, stripped of her position, and charges would be filed for embezzlement." She stood, dignity wrapped around her like armor, despite everything. "You'll regret this, Brian. That woman has already destroyed you. She's taken your child, built an empire to rival yours, and made you look like a fool. And you're punishing me for trying to stop her?" "No," Brian said quietly. "I'm punishing you for succeeding. If you'd failed, if your sabotage hadn't worked, maybe Harriet would still trust me. Maybe I'd have been in that delivery room. Maybe my daughter would have my name. You didn't protect me, Mother. You destroyed me." Eleanor left the boardroom with her head high, but Brian saw the truth. She was finished. Not just fired, but exposed. The business world would know she'd embezzled and lied. The Wilson name she'd fought so hard to protect was now attached to scandal. but it was hollow victory. Brian had exposed his mother's crimes, but it didn't change anything that mattered. Harriet was still gone. Isabella was still a stranger. His marriage was still shattered beyond repair. He spent the next week trying to reach Harriet through lawyers. Her response came back through her attorney, clinical, legal, final. She'd agreed to supervised visitation once Isabella was 6 months old. Until then, no contact, and there would be no reconciliation discussions. The marriage was over. Brian hired his own lawyers to fight for more access to his daughter. They told him the truth he didn't want to hear. She has evidence you missed the birth. She has hospital records of 17 unanswered calls. She has witnesses who can testify you were unreachable during her labor. No judge will give you custody when you weren't present for the birth. I didn't know she was in labor. Because you ignored 17 calls. That doesn't make you look better, Mr. Wilson. He couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, spent his nights reading every article about Harriet's empire, trying to understand the woman he'd married and never truly seen. The articles praised her vision, how she'd partnered with indigenous communities instead of exploiting them, how she'd learned languages and customs, how her properties were designed to honor local cultures while providing luxury experiences. One article included an interview with Harriet. The journalist asked about her inspiration. I watched someone build an empire by taking, Harriet had said. I wanted to build one by giving. By honoring, by seeing places and people as partners, not resources. Luxury should elevate everyone it touches, not just the wealthy who can afford it. And your personal life? You've kept that very private. I'm a mother now. That's all that matters to me. My daughter will inherit an empire built on respect and partnership. She'll learn that power isn't about domination. It's about creation. Building things that last because they're rooted in truth. The journalist had pushed, what about her father? Will he be part of teaching her those lessons? Harriet's response was devastating. Her father is learning some lessons of his own right now. Whether he learns them in time to know his daughter remains to be seen. Brian read that interview a dozen times, hearing her voice in every word. She wasn't angry in the interview. She wasn't bitter or vengeful. She was just done with him. He'd become irrelevant to her story. His company's stock continued to drop. Without Eleanor's ruthless tactics, but also without innovation, Wilson Global was losing ground. Meanwhile, Kemsley Expeditions was dominating every headline. Harriet had partnerships with UNESCO, with conservation groups, with governments. She was invited to speak at international conferences. She was changing the industry, and Brian was becoming a footnote in her success story. The ex-husband who missed the birth was how tabloids referred to him. Social media was brutal. Think pieces appeared about men who take their wives for granted. Harriet became a feminist icon, the woman who built an empire while her husband ignored her. Brian wanted to hate it, wanted to call it unfair, but he couldn't, because it was true. All of it. He kept trying to reach her. Sent flowers to her California estate. They were returned. Sent letters. They came back unopened. Sent gifts for Isabella. Her assistant sent them to charity. Harriet had built a wall he couldn't scale with money or connections or power. His mother was arrested for embezzlement. The trial would be public, humiliating. Brian didn't attend. He couldn't watch the woman who'd raised him be destroyed, even though she'd destroyed him first. Instead, he sat in his empty penthouse and looked at photos of Harriet and Isabella that appeared in magazines. His daughter was beautiful. Chubby cheeks, bright eyes, his smile. She existed in the world, breathing, growing, learning, and he'd never held her. Never smelled her baby scent, never heard her laugh. He'd been given heaven and traded it for hell without realizing the exchange was happening. And now hell was teaching him his name, one article at a time, one rejection at a time, one empty night at a time. His name was the man who wasn't there, the man who chose wrong, the man who lost everything that mattered while counting everything that didn't. Chapter 5. The woman who became untouchable. 6 months passed like a prison sentence. Brian counted every day without his daughter like a convict marking walls. He followed every mention of Harriet in the press, and there were many. She was everywhere, radiant and powerful, always photographed with Isabella on her hip or in her arms. His daughter was growing, changing, becoming a person he'd never know. He tried to prepare himself for the first supervised visitation, bought books on infant development, practiced holding dolls like an idiot, read every article on bonding with babies. None of it prepared him for the reality. The visitation center was clinical, white walls, observation windows, social workers taking notes. Harriet walked in carrying Isabella like she was made of starlight. The baby was bigger now, chunky and alert, wearing a dress that probably cost more than the furniture in the room. Brian stood, his heart hammering. This was his daughter, his child, his blood. Isabella took one look at him and burst into tears, burying her face in Harriet's neck. "She doesn't know you," Harriet said, her voice flat. "You're a stranger to her." "Then let me change that, please." Harriet sat in the chair farthest from him, adjusting Isabella in her lap. The baby peeked at Brian, then hid again, whimpering. The sound shredded him. "You have 1 hour," Harriet said. "Make it count." The hour was torture. Isabella wouldn't let him hold her, screamed when he tried, clung to Harriet like he was something dangerous. By the end, Brian was on the floor with toys he'd brought, trying to coax his daughter to smile at him. She wouldn't. She just watched him with suspicious eyes, his eyes in his daughter's face, and refused every overture. When the hour ended, Harriet stood without ceremony. "Same time next week. Maybe she'll tolerate you by then." "Harriet, wait. Can we talk? Just 5 minutes?" "About what?" "About us. About fixing this." She laughed, and the sound was cold. "There is no us to fix. There's a child who needs a father. If you can figure out how to be one, that's all. I've changed. I exposed my mother's crimes, cleaned up the company. I'm trying to be better. For who? For her, or for your own guilt?" Harriet shifted Isabella to her other hip. "You think exposing Eleanor makes you noble? You think firing your mother erases 17 unanswered calls? You're trying to rebuild your reputation, Brian. That's not the same as rebuilding yourself. That's not fair." "Fair?" Her eyes blazed. "Fair is being married to someone who shows up. Fair is having your husband present when you give birth. Fair is building something together instead of alone in the dark while he sleeps. Don't talk to me about fair." She walked out, Isabella's face visible over her shoulder, his daughter, already half-grown, looking at him like he was nothing. The visits continued weekly, slow, agonizing progress. By month 2, Isabella would let him hold her for a few minutes before crying. By month 3, she'd play with toys he brought, though she still ran to Harriet's arms whenever he tried to connect. Meanwhile, Harriet's empire exploded. She opened properties in Iceland, New Zealand, Madagascar. Every project was more ambitious than the last. Business magazines called her the most innovative mind in luxury travel. Forbes put her on their cover, the woman who changed everything. Brian saw the photo and felt sick. She was wearing a power suit, Isabella in her lap, both of them looking directly at the camera with identical expressions of strength. The caption read, "Harriet Kemsley doesn't need anyone's permission to build empires." He tried to focus on his own company, but Wilson Global was struggling. Without his mother's ruthlessness and without Harriet's vision, the company was just ordinary. Luxury resorts that looked like every other luxury resort. Experiences that people forgot. The magic was gone. His board pressured him constantly. "We need innovation. We need a partnership with Kemsley Expeditions. Negotiate something." But Harriet wouldn't take his calls, wouldn't respond to business proposals, wouldn't acknowledge his existence outside the sterile visitation center once a week. Then the photos appeared. Harriet, at a conservation gala in London, wearing a dress that made her look like a queen. And beside her, Dr. James Sterling, distinguished, silver-haired, everything Brian wasn't. The photos showed them laughing, his hand on her back, looking comfortable together. Natural. Brian hired investigators to learn about Sterling. The report made everything worse. Renowned conservation scientist, 60 years old but looked 50, widowed, wealthy from his family's pharmaceutical fortune, impeccable reputation, known for his partnerships with indigenous communities, his dedication to wildlife preservation, a man who dedicated his life to protecting beauty instead of exploiting it, a man who would never miss 17 phone calls. The photos kept coming. Sterling at Harriet's Kenya property holding Isabella, while Harriet negotiated with tribal elders. Sterling at her Bali resort, walking the beach with Harriet and Isabella between them, looking like a family. Sterling everywhere Harriet was, present and attentive, and there, Brian felt jealousy like acid in his veins. He wanted to dismiss Sterling as just another man trying to get close to Harriet's fortune. But the man had his own fortune, his own accomplishments, his own dignity. Sterling was everything Brian had failed to be, present, supportive, genuinely interested in the work itself rather than just the profits. At their next visitation, Brian couldn't stop himself. "Are you with him?" Harriet was helping Isabella stack blocks. She didn't look up. "That's none of your business. She's my daughter. It's my business if some man is around her." Now Harriet looked at him, and her eyes were ice. "Some man? James Sterling is one of the most respected scientists in the world. He's been nothing but kind to Isabella. She adores him, which is more than I can say about her biological father, who she still barely tolerates." The words hit like fists. "I'm trying. Every week I come here, I try. Trying isn't the same as succeeding. Showing up once a week in a supervised room isn't the same as being a father. James reads to her every night, plays with her every morning, carries her when she's tired. He's present, Brian. That's the difference between you two. I can't be present when you won't let me near her. I let you have supervised visits. That's more than you deserve. You want more? Earn it. Prove you're not just here out of obligation or guilt or whatever drives you. Prove you actually care about knowing her. How? How do I prove that when you've built a wall I can't climb?" Harriet stood, picking up Isabella. "That wall exists for a reason. You broke something, Brian. You don't get to demand I hand you the pieces and trust you'll be careful this time. You want to know your daughter? Then be someone worth knowing. Be someone who shows up not because he's scheduled to, but because he can't imagine being anywhere else. Be what James is, present. Until then, you're just the man who wasn't there when it mattered." She left, Isabella waving goodbye to him over her shoulder, a small hand, innocent, unaware that her father's heart was breaking. Brian sat in the empty visitation room and faced a truth he'd been avoiding. He was losing. Not just losing, he'd already lost. Harriet had moved on. Isabella barely knew him. Another man was raising his daughter, teaching her to walk and talk, being there for every moment Brian missed. He'd thought exposing his mother's crimes would fix things. He'd thought showing up to visitations would rebuild trust. But he'd been thinking about actions, not transformation. He'd been trying to check boxes instead of becoming someone different. Harriet didn't need him to show up once a week. She needed him to become someone who understood why those 17 unanswered calls were unforgivable. Someone who valued presence over profit, connection over conquest. She needed him to become someone he'd never been. And watching her leave with Isabella and knowing James Sterling was probably waiting for them at home, Brian realized with crushing clarity he might never become that person in time to matter. Some lessons come too late. Some transformations take longer than the love that needed them, and some women become so powerful that they don't need the men who broke them, no matter how much those men change. Chapter 6. The Man Who Means Nothing. Brian did something desperate. He flew to Kenya unannounced, tracking Harriet to her newest property, an eco-luxury safari lodge that was already being called one of the most beautiful places on earth. He showed up at the gates expecting security to stop him. Instead, Dr. James Sterling answered the door. The man was distinguished in person, silver hair, kind eyes, the weathered face of someone who'd spent his life outdoors studying wildlife. He looked at Brian with something like pity, Mr. Wilson, Harriet mentioned you might show up uninvited. Again. I need to see my daughter. Your daughter? Sterling's voice was measured, professional. The child you've seen exactly 9 times in supervised 1-hour visits. That daughter? The words were factual, not cruel, which somehow made them worse. Brian pushed past him into the house. No, not a house, a masterpiece. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the savannah. Local art on every wall. Furniture that looked both luxurious and respectful of the environment. Harriet appeared from another room, Isabella on her hip. She wore safari clothes that somehow looked elegant, her natural hair in braids, no makeup, glowing with health and power. Isabella was chattering in what sounded like Swahili mixed with baby babble. James, take Isabella to the nursery, please, Harriet said, her voice commanding. Sterling took the baby with practiced ease, kissing her forehead as she giggled. Come on, little star. Let's see if the elephants are at the watering hole. Brian watched another man carry his daughter away, speaking to her in a language Brian didn't understand, clearly comfortable with a routine they'd established without him. Alone with Harriet, the silence was crushing. You're teaching her Swahili? Brian asked. James is teaching her. Along with English and Kikuyu, she'll grow up multilingual, understanding multiple cultures. She'll be a citizen of the world, not just some rich American who treats other countries like theme parks. I could learn Swahili. I could teach her. You could, but you won't, because learning languages requires presence, dedication, showing up every day. That's never been your strength. Brian felt the words like cuts. I'm here now. You're here because your company is failing and you need something from me. You're here because seeing photos of me and James together made you jealous. You're here for you, Brian, not for Isabella, not for me, for your own ego. That's not true, isn't it? You flew to Kenya unannounced, without asking, without permission. You barged into my home. You ignored every boundary I set. That's not love, Brian, that's entitlement. You still think you have rights to me, to our daughter, to our lives, because once upon a time, I made the mistake of marrying you. It wasn't a mistake. We were happy. You were happy. I was invisible. Harriet walked to the window, looking out at the savannah. I spent 2 years of our marriage being ignored. Every dinner where you took calls. Every trip you cancelled. Every time you chose your mother's voice over mine. I was invisible, and I told myself it was temporary. That once you proved yourself, you'd see me again. But you never would have. I'd have spent my life being the beautiful wife you forgot to look at. I see you now. Too late. She turned, and her face was stone. I built an empire without you. I'm raising a brilliant daughter without you. I have a life full of purpose and power, and people who actually see me. I don't need you anymore, Brian. I don't want you. And I certainly don't love you. The words should have destroyed him, but something in her eyes made him look closer. You're lying. Excuse me. You still love me. I can see it. You hate that you do, but you do. Harriet's jaw tightened. Love isn't enough. It was never about love. It was about being seen, being chosen, being valued. You loved the idea of me, but you didn't value the reality. And now you show up expecting what? Forgiveness? Reconciliation? You think flying to Kenya erases 17 unanswered calls. I think I'm trying. I think I'm here fighting for us. There is no us. Her voice rose, the first crack in her armor. There's a child who deserves a father, but there's no us. That died in a hospital room while I screamed your name. And you were oceans away, doing exactly what your mother told you to do. That's what you can't accept. I don't want you back. I don't want to fix this. I don't want anything from you except to be the father our daughter deserves. And right now, James is better at that than you. Is that why you're with him? To replace me? I'm not with James, not the way you mean. But even if I were, that's none of your business. You don't get to be jealous. You don't get to be hurt. You gave up those rights when you ignored my calls. Through the window, Brian could see Sterling playing with Isabella near the elephants. The baby was laughing, pointing at the massive animals with fearless joy. Sterling was crouched beside her, teaching her something, completely absorbed in her happiness. He's good with her, Brian admitted. He's present with her. There's a difference. Harriet's voice softened slightly. James shows up, Brian. Every morning, every evening, every moment he's here. He doesn't see it as obligation. He sees it as privilege. He's teaching Isabella about conservation, about respecting wildlife, about seeing the world as something to protect, not exploit. He's giving her gifts you never could because you never learned to see beyond profit margins. I want to learn. Teach me. No, the word was final. I'm not your teacher. I'm not your second chance. I'm not your redemption story. I'm a woman who built something incredible after you tried to make her feel small. And I'm raising a daughter who will never feel small because of a man. That's my life now. You're not part of it. Sterling came back carrying Isabella, who was chattering about elephants. She saw Brian and her expression shifted, not fear anymore, but confusion, like she was trying to remember who he was. Daddy, Harriet prompted quietly. Isabella studied Brian, then shook her head and pointed at Sterling. Dada. The world stopped. Brian felt something crack inside his chest. His daughter, his blood, his eyes, his face was calling another man Daddy. Sterling looked uncomfortable. She's confused. I've been here a lot, and it's fine, Brian said, his voice hollow. She's right. You're more her father than I am. He walked out of the house, past the elephants, past the perfect savannah sunset. He could hear Harriet calling after him, but her voice sounded far away. All he could hear was his daughter's voice, Dada, pointing at someone else. He'd lost more than his wife. He'd lost the privilege of being called father. He'd lost the right to be the man his daughter reached for. He'd lost everything that mattered because he thought he had time, thought he could fix it later, thought love was enough without presence. Some things can't be reclaimed. Some titles have to be earned, not inherited. And some men discover too late that they've become strangers to their own children. Chapter 7. The War He Cannot Win. Brian returned home destroyed. He'd flown to Kenya thinking he'd fight for his family. He'd returned knowing his family didn't include him anymore. Isabella called another man father. Harriet had built a life that didn't need him. He was irrelevant to their story. His board called an emergency meeting. Wilson Global was hemorrhaging money. 3 major resort partnerships had fallen through. Investors were pulling out. The company his father built was dying. We need a solution, the board chair said. The only solution is Kemsley. Negotiate a merger, a partnership, something. Without her innovation, we're finished. Brian drafted a proposal that cost him everything. Wilson Global and Kemsley Expeditions merge. Harriet gets majority ownership, 55%. She controls operations, implements her vision across all properties. Brian becomes chief operating officer under her leadership. Isabella's inheritance is protected through ironclad trusts. He sent the proposal through his lawyers, expecting negotiation. Harriet's response came back in 48 hours. She didn't want a merger. She wanted to buy Wilson Global outright. $15 billion. Brian could stay as a regional director, a massive demotion, or take a buyout and leave. She didn't want partnership. She wanted his company. All of it. His board panicked. If she acquires us, the Wilson name disappears. 3 generations of legacy gone. They begged Brian to negotiate, to offer something she wanted. But what did Harriet want? She had money, power, success. She had a man who treated her like a queen. She had a daughter who was thriving. She had everything. Brian requested a face-to-face meeting. Harriet agreed, but only because her lawyers advised it. They met in a conference room at her California estate. She brought her entire legal team. He came alone. The conference room overlooked the ocean. The same terrace where he'd first seen her through security cameras. The same place she'd stood holding Isabella and refusing to let him in. Now he was here by invitation, but only barely. Harriet was professional, cold. Designer suit, hair perfect, every inch the billionaire mogul. She looked at him like he was a problem to solve, not a person she'd once loved. You have 30 minutes, she said. Make your case. Brian didn't make a business case. Couldn't. The numbers were clear. Her company was worth more, growing faster, positioned better. Instead, he told her the truth. Take the company, dismantle it, absorb it, do whatever you want with it. I don't care anymore. Let it die. But Isabella deserves better than a father who sees her 1 hour a week in a supervised room. Isabella has everything she needs. Does she? Or does she have a mother working constantly to build an empire and a father who's a stranger? I was wrong about everything, but you're making the same mistake now, choosing the empire over the child. The conference room went silent. Harriet's lawyers looked at each other. Harriet's face went very still. "How dare you?" she said quietly. "How dare you come into my home and accuse me of neglecting our daughter? I'm not accusing. I'm observing. Every photo of you shows you at a property opening, a conservation gala, a business conference. When was the last time you were just home with her? Just being her mother, not building her inheritance? I work so she'll have security, so she'll inherit something meaningful, so she'll understand that women can be powerful. She's barely walking, Harriet. She doesn't care about empires. She cares about who holds her when she's scared. And from what I saw in Kenya, that's James Sterling, not you. You're so busy proving you don't need me that you're becoming exactly what I was, absent." Harriet stood, shaking with rage. "This meeting is over. My lawyers will send the acquisition papers. You have 2 weeks. Sell to me or watch me destroy Wilson Global piece by piece through competition. Either way, you lose. What about Isabella? Do we both lose with her?" "Isabella is happy. She's loved. She has a mother who's building her a future, and a man in her life who's been more of a father in months than you've been in her entire life. Sign the papers, Brian. Accept that you're not needed. In business or in her life." She walked out, her legal team following. Brian sat alone in the conference room overlooking the ocean and realized something profound. He was right. Harriet was so focused on building an empire that proved she didn't need him, that she was missing her daughter's life. Just like he'd missed Harriet's life. They were both choosing empires over presence, both building legacies while the person who mattered most grew up in the spaces between their accomplishments. And Isabella was the one paying the price. Chapter 8. The Truth That Destroys Pride. Brian did something radical. He didn't sign the acquisition papers. Instead, he stepped down as CEO of Wilson Global, voluntarily, no buyout, no severance. Just walked away from the empire his father built, his grandfather expanded, 3 generations of legacy. The business world went insane. Headlines everywhere. Wilson heir abandons family empire. Financial analysts predicted Wilson Global's collapse. His former board called him a fool. His lawyers said he was throwing away billions. Brian didn't care. He liquidated his personal assets, properties, cars, investments. Kept enough to live comfortably, nothing more. The rest went to charities focused on maternal health. Hospitals across multiple countries received anonymous donations for new maternity wings, all in Harriet's name. Then he disappeared. No press statements, no social media, just gone. He ended up in Tanzania, in a village near Harriet's first safari lodge. Not at the lodge, he had no right to be on her property. But in the village where she'd built partnerships, where she'd learned Swahili, where she'd started her revolution. He rented a small house, started volunteering at a school that needed repairs, learned Swahili from the same teachers who'd taught Harriet, spent his days building classrooms, and his nights learning about cultures he'd ignored his entire life. Months passed. Nobody knew where he was except his lawyer, who handled the final details of transferring Wilson Global to Harriet. The acquisition went through. The Wilson name was retired. Harriet's empire absorbed his, making her the undisputed queen of luxury travel. $30 billion, most powerful woman in the industry. Brian saw the headlines on his phone, the only connection he kept to his old life. He saw photos of Harriet at the signing ceremony, looking victorious. He saw Isabella in the background playing with Sterling, both of them celebrating with her. He deleted the news apps, went back to building schools. Nearly a full cycle of seasons passed. Brian lived simply, worked hard, learned constantly. The villagers accepted him, not as a billionaire, but as the man who showed up every day to help build things that mattered. Children taught him their games. Elders taught him their history. He became part of something real. One afternoon, he was in a half-built classroom, hammer in hand, teaching children English, when he felt someone watching. He turned, and there she was, Harriet. She stood in the doorway of the skeletal classroom, wearing safari clothes, looking at him like she'd seen a ghost. The children scattered, sensing adult business. They were alone. "You've been here the whole time," she said. "Not a question. Nearly a year now, yes. Building schools, among other things. Learning languages. Trying to understand what you understood years ago, that wealth means nothing without purpose." She walked into the classroom, looking at the drawings children had made on the walls. Photos of animals, families, the village. Simple, pure, real. "You gave up everything," she said. "I gave up things that didn't matter. I'm trying to build things that do. For me, for Isabella. Is this some grand gesture to win us back?" "No," Brian set down his hammer. "This is for me, to become someone I can live with. Someone who deserves to know his daughter, even if she never wants to know me." Harriet studied him, really studied him. Saw the weight he'd lost, the tan from working outdoors, the calluses on his hands, the peace in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "Isabella asks about you," she said quietly. "She's talking more now. She has this picture book of families, and she points to the father's and asks where hers is." Brian felt his throat close. "What do you tell her?" "I don't know anymore. I wanted to say you were a mistake," I corrected. "That we're better without you. But she has this hole in her life and I can't fill it. I thought I could. I thought my love and my empire and James's presence would be enough. But it's not. No. She's looking for you." Harriet's voice cracked slightly. "She draws pictures of you. They're terrible. She's a toddler. But there's always 3 people. Her, me, and someone else. A man with no face. Just an empty circle where a father should be." Brian closed his eyes against the pain. "Can I see her? Really see her? Not in some supervised room? That's why I'm here. To see if you've changed, or if this is just another performance." She gestured at the classroom, the village. "Is this real, Brian? Or is this you trying to become what you think I want, so you can get what you want?" "It's real. I don't expect anything from you. I don't expect forgiveness or reconciliation or another chance. I'm here because I finally understood what you tried to teach me, that people matter more than profits, that presence matters more than possession, that being somewhere every day matters more than grand gestures." Harriet walked to a wall where children had drawn pictures of him teaching them. She touched one gently. "James proposed," she said suddenly. "He offered me everything I thought I wanted. Partnership, respect, presence. He loves Isabella like she's his own. He's everything you weren't." Brian felt something die inside him. "When's the wedding?" "There isn't one." I said no. His heart stuttered. "Why?" "Because when he proposed, I felt nothing. He's perfect, and I felt nothing. And I realized I've been running, building bigger, working longer, staying busy, so I don't have to deal with what you did to me. I haven't moved on. I've just buried it under empires and success." She turned to face him. "But Isabella doesn't need my empire. She needs her mother, and she needs her father. The real question is whether you can be that. I want to try. Not to win you back, I know that's gone, but to know my daughter, to be someone she doesn't have to explain or apologize for. To be present." "Present," Harriet repeated. "For how long?" "Until it gets hard. Until business needs you. Until your mother—" "My mother is in prison. My business is gone. I have nothing but time and this village and a daughter I've never really known. I can be present for the rest of my life, if you let me." They stood in the unfinished classroom as afternoon light slanted through empty window frames. Years of pain and betrayal between them. A daughter waiting somewhere, drawing pictures of ghosts. "I can't promise forgiveness," Harriet said finally. "I can't promise I'll ever trust you again. But Isabella needs you. So we try, slowly, with boundaries. And if you disappoint her the way you disappointed me, you'll never get another chance." Do you understand? I understand. Then come meet your daughter. Really meet her, not as a stranger in a visitation room, but as her father. If you can figure out how to be that. She walked toward the door. Brian followed, his heart hammering. Outside, a car waited. In the back seat, he could see Isabella's car seat empty. Harriet had left her somewhere safe while checking if Brian was worth bringing into her life. The real test was just beginning. And for the first time in years, Brian felt something like hope. Chapter 9. The Woman Who Needs Nothing from Him. Harriet brought Isabella to the village the next day. Brian waited outside the small house he'd been living in, hands shaking, heart racing. The car pulled up, and Harriet got out first, then lifted Isabella from her seat. His daughter was bigger now, walking confidently, chattering constantly, wearing a little dress covered in elephants. She looked around the village with curious eyes, saw Brian, and tilted her head like she was trying to remember something important. "Isabella," Harriet said gently, crouching beside her. "This is your daddy. Remember the pictures?" Isabella studied Brian seriously. Then she walked toward him, not running, not excited, but curious. She stopped a few feet away and said in perfect Swahili, "Why weren't you here before?" The question was so direct, so innocent, so devastating that Brian couldn't speak for a moment. He looked at Harriet, who translated even though he'd understood. "She wants to know why you weren't present in her life." Brian knelt down to Isabella's level. "I made mistakes, big ones. I wasn't there when you were born, and I should have been. I can't change that. But I'm here now, if you'll let me be." Isabella processed this with the seriousness of someone much older. Then she walked closer and touched his face with one small hand. "You look like me. You look like me too. We have the same eyes. Mama says I'm strong like her and stubborn like you." Brian laughed despite the tears in his eyes. "Your mama is right about everything." "Not everything," Isabella said firmly. "She cries sometimes when she thinks I'm sleeping. She looks at pictures and cries." Harriet's face went pale. "Isabella." "It's okay, Mama." Isabella patted Brian's face, then walked back to Harriet and took her hand. "To both of them," she said, "can Daddy teach me English games? Like Mama taught me Swahili ones?" The moment was small, ordinary and completely transformative. Permission granted by a toddler who didn't understand the weight of what she was offering. Brian spent 3 days in the village with them. He didn't stay in Harriet's lodge. That was still her sanctuary. But he saw Isabella every day. They played in the village, with children teaching her games while Brian learned alongside her. She taught him a Swahili song. He taught her to skip rocks at a stream. Harriet watched from a distance, arms crossed, guarded. She didn't interact with Brian beyond necessary coordination about Isabella's schedule and needs. But she didn't leave. She stayed, watching, evaluating, protecting. On the 3rd evening after Isabella fell asleep in Harriet's arms, Brian and Harriet sat on opposite ends of a porch, the savannah stretching before them. They hadn't been alone together like this since the delivery room hospital confrontation. "She's remarkable," Brian said. "Brilliant, beautiful, strong like you. She has your stubbornness. That's not the worst thing to inherit." Silence fell between them, not comfortable but not hostile either. Just the weight of everything unsaid. "I can't forgive you," Harriet said finally. "I've tried to convince myself I should, that for Isabella's sake we should find some way to peace. But when I close my eyes, I still hear myself screaming your name in that delivery room. I still feel the humiliation of nurses asking where my husband was and not having an answer. That doesn't go away just because you've spent time building schools. I know. Do you? Do you understand that what you did broke something in me that doesn't heal? I built an empire to prove I didn't need you, but underneath all that power, I'm still the woman you abandoned. That woman doesn't trust you." "She never will." Brian absorbed the words. "Then what are we doing here? Why bring Isabella to me if you'll never trust me?" "Because it's not about what I need. It's about what she needs. She needs a father who shows up, who's present, who values her. You're trying to be that person." I can see you trying, but trying and succeeding are different things. How long do I have to succeed before you believe it's real? I don't know. Maybe years, maybe never. But Isabella doesn't have years to wait for us to figure out our damage. She's growing up right now, and she deserves both parents present and functional, even if we're not together. Are you with James? Harriet looked at him sharply. What does that matter? It matters because I need to know if I'm competing with someone or if this is just about you and me. You're not competing with anyone. James is a friend, a good man who showed up when I needed support. But I'm not with him romantically. I realized I was using him, using his presence to prove I'd moved on. That wasn't fair to him. So you're alone. By choice. I have Isabella. I have my work. I have purpose. I don't need a man to complete me. I learned that lesson the hard way. They sat in silence as night sounds filled the savannah, distant animal calls, wind through grass, the vast emptiness of wild places. I love you, Brian said quietly. I never stopped. I know that doesn't matter, doesn't change anything, but I need you to know. Love isn't enough, Harriet responded. It was never enough. You loved me while ignoring me. You loved me while choosing everything else over me. Love without action is just words. Then let me show you through action. Not grand gestures, just presence. Every day showing up, being the father Isabella needs. Being someone you can trust with her, even if you'll never trust me with yourself. Harriet stood, walking to the porch railing. Her silhouette against the stars was powerful, untouchable, everything he'd lost. We'll try, she said. Supervised visits in the village. Regular schedule. If you can maintain consistency, if Isabella continues to bond with you, we'll expand access. But this isn't about us reuniting. This is about co-parenting. Nothing more. I understand. Do you? Because I see the way you look at me. I hear the hope in your voice. You think if you're patient enough, consistent enough, I'll forgive you. That we'll become a family. But we won't. That chance died in a hospital room. I'm allowing you to be Isabella's father. But I'll never be your wife again. The words were meant to be final, definitive. But Brian heard something underneath them, a fear that maybe she wasn't as unmoved as she wanted to be, a worry that presence might crack the walls she'd built. He didn't argue, didn't push, just said, "Thank you for letting me know my daughter. That's more than I deserve." Harriet looked at him then, really looked, and for the first time he saw confusion in her eyes, like she'd expected him to fight, to demand more, to push boundaries. His acceptance of limits was unexpected. "We leave tomorrow," she said. "You can visit Isabella twice a month here in the village. Video calls 3 times a week. I'll send you updates on her development, but boundaries stay firm. Are we clear?" Crystal clear. She went inside where Isabella slept. Brian stayed on the porch, watching stars emerge, and knew he was playing a long game. Harriet had built walls to protect herself. He couldn't tear them down. But maybe, through years of showing up, of being present without demanding anything in return, he could prove that some people actually change. Or maybe he was fooling himself. Maybe some things stay broken no matter how carefully you try to hold the pieces. But for Isabella's sake, he'd try anyway. Chapter 10. The reunion that rewrites everything. Years passed like water through an hourglass, steady, measured, irreversible. Brian kept his word. Twice monthly visits to Tanzania. 3 video calls per week. Never missed once. He watched Isabella grow from a toddler to a little girl through screens and brief visits, learning her laugh, her stubbornness, her brilliant mind. Harriet kept her walls firmly in place. Polite, professional, focused entirely on Isabella's well-being. They were successful co-parents by any measure, but there was no warmth between them, no forgiveness, no romance. Just a child they both loved, and a chasm between them that never narrowed. Isabella was starting preschool, nearly 5 years old now. Both parents agreed to take her together for her first day in California, a neutral territory compromise. Brian flew in from Tanzania, where he now ran an NGO building schools across East Africa. Harriet flew in from her newest property in New Zealand. They met at the school, both early, both nervous. It was the first time they'd been alone together in months. Isabella was with a nanny, getting ready. The parking lot was empty except for their cars. "She's nervous," Harriet said, breaking the silence. "She's afraid the other kids won't like her because she talks about elephants too much." Brian smiled. "She got that from you, the passion and the stubbornness from you. She spent an hour this morning insisting she needed to wear her safari hat to school. Did she win?" Of course. I can't say no to her." Harriet's smile was small, genuine, the first real one he'd seen in years. "You're good with her. The video calls, the visits, you've been consistent. She trusts you now." "She's easy to be consistent for." "Not for everyone." The words hung between them, loaded with history. They walked into the school together as other parents began arriving. Whispers followed them, the famous ex-couple, the business moguls, the scandal everyone still remembered. Isabella ran up, her little safari hat perched on her head, looking nervous and brave. "Both my parents are here," she announced to the teacher with pride. "Mama runs the biggest travel company in the world, and Daddy builds schools in Africa." Simple, matter-of-fact, the world, according to a child who'd normalized having powerful parents who lived separate lives. Brian felt his heart swell and break simultaneously. The morning flew by, meeting teachers, seeing the classroom, watching Isabella tentatively make friends with other children. When it was time to leave her, she hugged both parents fiercely. "You'll both come back?" she asked, seeking reassurance. "Always," they said together. In the parking lot after, they stood by their cars, the moment stretching awkward and heavy. "She's happy," Brian said. "That's what matters." "She is. You've been part of making that happen. I can't deny that." "But," Harriet shook her head, "no buts. I'm just acknowledging reality. You've shown up, Brian, for years. You've been the father she needed. I'm grateful for that." "Grateful," Brian repeated. "That's something, at least. What do you want me to say? That I forgive you? That we should try again?" Harriet's voice was sad, not angry. "I can't. I've tried to let go of the anger, the hurt. Some days I think I have. Then I'll see something. An old photo, a wedding announcement, a pregnant woman being supported by her husband, and it all comes back. The humiliation, the loneliness, the betrayal. I understand. Do you? You've changed, I see that. You're a better person than you were. But you changed after you lost everything. After there were no more consequences to avoid. That's growth, but it's not redemption. Not for me." A teacher walked by, waving at them both. They waved back, keeping up appearances. Perfect co-parents. Successful collaboration. No one seeing the chasm between them. "What about you?" Brian asked. "Are you happy?" Harriet considered. "I'm fulfilled. I have Isabella, my work, purpose. I've built something meaningful. But happy? I don't know if I trust happiness anymore. You taught me that happiness is fragile, that trusting it means losing it. That's the saddest thing I've ever heard." "It's honest." She looked at him directly. "We've built something functional here. Isabella has two parents who love her, who show up for her, who coordinate for her benefit. That's more than a lot of children have. It's enough. Is it enough for you, though? Having everything except someone to share it with? I don't need someone. I learned that lesson thoroughly. Everyone needs someone, Harriet, even people as powerful as you." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Maybe someday, but not you. That door closed years ago. It's staying closed." Brian absorbed the finality. Years of showing up, of proving himself, of being consistent, and the door was still closed. He'd known it intellectually, but hearing it stated so clearly still hurt. "Then I'll keep showing up for Isabella," he said. "That's enough. It has to be. It's more than enough. She's lucky to have you." Harriet moved toward her car. "I'll send you the parent-teacher conference schedule. We'll coordinate calendars." "Harriet, wait." She paused, hand on her car door. "Do you ever think about what could have been? If I'd answered those calls? If we'd raised her together?" For a long moment she didn't answer. When she did, her voice was barely audible. Every single day, I think about the family we could have been, the partnership we could have maintained, the love that could have survived if you'd just been present. I think about alternate timelines, where you answered the phone, where you were there holding my hand, where Isabella knew from her first breath that she had two parents who chose her above everything else. Me too. But that's not our timeline. This is, and I've made peace with it, even if I can't forgive what created it. She opened her car door. See you at the conference next month. Don't be late. She drove away. Brian stood in the parking lot, watching her disappear, and understood with crystalline clarity. He'd won back his daughter, but lost his wife forever. Some victories feel like losses. Some things stay broken despite your best efforts. He'd become a good father. A better man. Someone who showed up consistently, who valued presence over profit, who understood what mattered. But understanding what mattered didn't change what he'd lost. Some women become so powerful they don't need the men who broke them. Some walls are built too high to climb. Some doors close and stay closed, even when both people have changed. Brian got in his car and drove back to his hotel, already mentally planning his next video call with Isabella. Tomorrow morning at 8, like clockwork. He'd show up. He always showed up now. But as he drove, he couldn't stop thinking about Harriet's admission that she thought about alternate timelines every day. That underneath all her power and success and walls, she still mourned what they could have been. Maybe that was enough. Not reconciliation or romance, but acknowledgement that they both carried the weight of what was lost. That neither had fully moved on, even if moving forward was all they could manage. Isabella would grow up loved by both parents. She'd inherit empires and lessons about presence, about respect, about building things that mattered. She'd never lack for anything, except maybe seeing her parents happy together. But plenty of children grew up with divorced parents who co-parented successfully. Isabella would be fine. The question was whether Harriet would ever be more than fine. Whether she'd ever trust happiness again. Whether someone as powerful as she'd become could ever let herself be vulnerable enough to love. Brian didn't have those answers. He only had his consistent presence, his dedication to Isabella, and the hope that someday, maybe years from now, Harriet might look at him and see more than the man who broke her. Or maybe not. Maybe she'd stay untouchable forever, a woman who became fire to avoid being burned again. Either way, he'd keep showing up for Isabella, and maybe, quietly, for the woman who'd taught him what presence meant, even if she never let him close again. Some men don't realize they're holding heaven until it slips through their fingers, and some women learn that heaven isn't found in anyone's hands but their own. He became the man who learned too late. She became the fire that forged herself, and their daughter became the bridge between two people who'd loved each other once, lost each other completely, and found a way to be family anyway, broken, separate, but present. Sometimes that's the only ending that's true.